What's up, y'all? Welcome to Tea Time with Letitia. It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. So, essentially, what I wanted to do today was share with you all something that I've done with my yoga class. For this Black History Month, I've been doing a yoga series where we do yoga while listening to the words of Black philosophers and Black leaders in history. And so this past Monday was the first Monday of Black History Month, and we listened to Alain Leroy Locke, and I read an excerpt from his book, The New Negro, or from some of his texts. And so I figured, why not share that recording with the rest of you all? And I haven't done a tea time in so long, so why not have some tea while we listen to the doctor? And with that, we can go ahead and get started. If you're interested in knowing like more about him, feel free to look him up. If you are interested in me doing more things like this, let me know in the comments. With that, yeah, let's get started. The New Negro by Dr. Alain Leroy Locke, first published in 1925, read by Letitia Franklin. In the last decade, something beyond the watch and guard of statistics has happened in the life of the American Negro and the three Norns who have traditionally presided over the Negro problem have a changeling in their laps. The sociologist, the philanthropist, the race leader are not unaware of the new Negro, but they are at a loss to account for him. He simply cannot be swathed in their formula, for the younger generation is vibrant with a new psychology, and the new spirit is awake in the masses and under the very eyes of the professional observers is transforming what has been a perennial problem into the progressive phases of contemporary Negro life. Could such a metamorphosis have taken place as suddenly as it has appeared to? The answer is no, not because the new Negro is not here, but because the old Negro had long become more of a myth than a man. The old Negro, we must remember, was a creature of moral debate and historical controversy. His has been a stock figure perpetuated as an historical fiction, partly in innocent sentimentalism, partly in deliberate reactionism. The Negro himself has contributed his share to this sort of protective social mimicry forced upon him by the adverse circumstances of dependence. So, for generations in the mind of America, the Negro has been more of a formula than a human being, a something to be argued about, condemned, or defended, to be kept down or in his place or helped up, to be worried with or worried over, harassed or patronized, a social boogie, or a social burden. The thinking Negro has been induced to share this same general attitude, to focus his attention on controversial issues, to see himself in the distorted perspective of a social problem. His shadow, so to speak, has been more real to him than his personality. Through having had to appeal from the unjust stereotypes of his oppressors and transducers to those of his liberators, friends, and benefactors, he has had to subscribe to the traditional positions from which his case has been viewed. Little true social or self-understanding has or could come from such a situation. But while the minds of us Black and white have thus burrowed in the trenches of the Civil War and Reconstruction, the actual march of development has simply flanked these positions, necessitating a sudden reorientation of view. We have not been watching in the right direction, set north and south on a sectional axis. We have not noticed the east till the sun has us blinking. Recall how suddenly the Negro spirituals revealed themselves, suppressed for generations under the stereotypes of Wesleyan hymn harmony secretive, half ashamed, until the courage of being natural brought them out, and behold, there was folk music. Similarly, the mind of the Negro seems suddenly to have slipped from under the tyranny of social intimidation and to be shaking off the psychology of imitation and implied inferiority. By shedding the old chrysalis of the Negro problem, we are achieving something like a spiritual emancipation. Until recently, lacking self understanding, we have been almost as much of a problem to ourselves and as we still are to others. But the decade that found us with a problem has left us with only one task. The multitude perhaps feels as yet only a strange relief and a new vague urge, but the thinking few know that in the reaction, the vital inner group of prejudice has been broken. With this renewed self respect and self dependence, the life of the Negro community is bound to enter a dynamic phase, the buoyancy from within compensating for whatever pressure there may be of conditions from without. The migrant mass is shifting from countryside to city, hurdles several generations of experience at a leap. But more important, the same thing happens spiritually in the life attitudes and self expression of the young Negro. In his poetry, his art, his education, and his new outlook, with the additional advantage, of course, of the poise and greater certainty of knowing what it is all about. From this comes the promise and warrant of a new leadership. As one of them has discerningly put it, we have tomorrow bright before us like a flame. Yesterday, a night gone thing, a sundown name. A dawn today, broad arch above the road we came, we march. This is what, even more than any most credible record of 50 years of freedom, requires that the Negro of today be seen through other than the dusty spectacles of past controversy. The day of aunties, uncles, and mamies is equally gone. Uncle Tom and Sambo have passed on, and even the Colonel and George play barnstorm roles from which they escape with relief when the public spotlight is off. The popular melodrama has played itself out, and it is time to scrape the fictions, garret the boogies, and settle down to a realistic facing of facts. First, we must observe some of the changes which, since the traditional lines of opinion were drawn, have rendered these quite obsolete. A main change has been, of course, that shifting of the Negro population, which has made the Negro problem no longer exclusively or even predominantly Southern. Why should our minds remain sectionalized when the problem itself no longer is? Then the trend of migration has not only been toward the North and the central Midwest, but cityward and to the great centers of industry. The problems of adjustment are new, practical, local, and not peculiarly racial. Rather, they are an integral part of the large industrial and social problems of our present day democracy. And finally, with the Negro rapidly in progress of class differentiation, if it ever was warrantable to regard and treat the Negro in mass, it is becoming with every day less possible, more unjust, and more ridiculous. In the very process of being transplanted, the Negro is becoming transformed. The tide of Negro migration northward and cityward is not to be fully explained as a blind flood started by the demands of war industry coupled with the shutting off of foreign migration, or by the pressure of poor crops coupled with increased social terrorism in certain sections of the South and Southwest. Neither labor demand, the Bull Weevil, nor the Ku Klux Klan is a basic factor. However, contributory any or all of them may have been. The wash and rush of this human tide on the beach line of the northern city centers is to be explained primarily in terms of a new vision of opportunity, of social and economic freedom, of a spirit to seize even in the face of an extortionate and heavy toll, a chance for the improvement of conditions. With each successive wave of it, the movement of the Negro becomes more and more a mass movement toward the larger and the more democratic chance. In the Negro's case, a deliberate flight not only from the countryside to city, but from the medieval America to modern. Take Harlem as an instance. Here in Manhattan, it is not merely the largest Negro community in the world, but the first concentration in history of so many diverse elements of Negro life. It has attracted the African, the West Indian, the Negro American, has brought together the Negro of the North and the Negro of the South, the man from the city and the man from the town and village, the peasant, the student, the businessman, the professional man, the artist, poet, musician, adventurer, and worker, preacher and criminal, exploiter and social outcast. Each group has come with its own separate motives and for its own special ends, but their greatest experience has been the finding of one another. Cultural exchange and enlightenment can only be decided by the attitude of the dominant races in an era of critical change. With the American Negro, his new internationalism is primarily an effort to recapture contact with the scattered peoples of African derivation. Garvanism may be a transient, if spectacular, phenomenon, but the possible role of the American Negro in the future development of Africa is one of the most constructive and universally helpful missions that any modern people can lay claim to. Constructive participation in such causes can not help giving the Negro valuable group incentives, as well as increased prestige at home and abroad. Our greatest rehabilitation may possibly come through such channels, but for the present, more immediate hope rests in the reevaluation by white and Black alike of the Negro in terms of his artistic endowments and cultural contributions, past and prospective. It must be increasingly recognized that the Negro has already made very substantial contributions, not only in his folk art, music especially, which has always found appreciation, but in larger, though humbler and less acknowledged ways. For generations, the Negro has been the peasant matrix of that section of America which has most undervalued him. And here he has contributed not only materially in labor and in social patience, but spiritually as well. The South has unconsciously absorbed the gift of his folk temperament. In less than half of a generation, it will be easier to recognize this, but the fact remains that a leaven of humor, sentiment, imagination, and tropic nonchalance has gone into the making of the South from a humble, unacknowledged source. A second crop of the Negro's gifts promises still more largely. He now becomes a conscious contributor and lies aside the status of a beneficiary and ward for that of a collaborator and participant in American civilization. The great social gain in this is the releasing of our talented group from the arid fields of controversy and debate to the productive fields of creative expression. The especially cultural recognition they win should in turn prove the key to that reevaluation of the Negro, which must precede or accompany any considerable further betterment of race relationships. But whatever the general effect, the present generation will have added the motives of self-expression and spiritual development to the old and still unfinished task of making material headway and progress. No one who understandably faces the situation with its substantial accomplishment or views the new scene with its still more abundant promise can be entirely without hope. And certainly, if in our lifetime the Negro should not be able to celebrate his full initiation into American democracy, he can at least, on the warrant of these things, celebrate the attainment of a significant and satisfying new phase of group development, and with it a spiritual coming of age.
Well,
that is the end of that excerpt. And as I was listening to the excerpt, two things came to mind when Sambo and Uncle Tom was mentioned. If you are unaware, Uncle Tom is actually the person, the slave, the black male who refused to beat the women. He refused to, well, he didn't. He refused to beat the women. He made sure that the slaves had cotton. Like he would do things to make the lives of the other slaves easier. He was the bolder slave. They say that it comes from the phrase Tom Turkey. And Tom Turkey is a wild turkey. You also think about the phrase tomboy, right? Like that's a phrase that they use to talk about girls who are more boyish, quote unquote, in their mannerisms and actions. And they call them tomboys to represent a rough girl. So to clear up some things out there, when you call someone an Uncle Tom, make sure they're deserving of the title. So someone who is fighting for the rights of Black people, someone who is trying to make the lives of other historically excluded groups easier, that is an Uncle Tom. Sambo. Now, Sambo, that was the one who would sell you out. So do your little research. The other thing that stood out to me was the part about Harlem, Manhattan, and how it was the center of diversity for the Black community at one point. Like all the different groups of Black people from Africa, American Black people, like, you know, you forget just how culturally important places may have been at one point, and maybe they're not so important today, or maybe they just aren't paid as much attention to. But that was a good remembrance for me. And then finally, I did not start this out right. Like I didn't tell y'all the tea I was drinking. I didn't do my what's up, y'all. Welcome to Gratified Grad. Well, hold on. What's up, y'all? Welcome to Tea Time with Letitia on Gratified Grad, where it's my goal to help you graduate with gratification. Today's video, I am drinking Spice Cherry. It is a mix of Morello cherry, sweet blackberries, tart hibiscus, and orange peel. I think there's also some cinnamon in here. I don't know where the exact, oh, here we go. Let's see, apple, hibiscus, sweet blackberry, rose hip, cinnamon, orange peel, clove, and Morello cherry. This is actually really good. I really like it. I kind of use this as like a evening, like chill tea. So good earth, go for them. They're pretty good. I hope that you gained some insight, learned something new, got a little Black history fact in for the day. Have a great evening. See ya.